But, I mean, I've got to give, all right, I've been tough, but I'm not Robinson Crusoe on that, I've got to say. But give Anthony Albanese credit today. He can be a funny guy, you know, in private. And in the end, he really doesn't like Greens. Or, for that matter, it seems now, sanctimonious Teal MPs, like the most sanctimonious of them all, Monique Ryan. Critical background. Monique Ryan got elected to a Victorian seat of Kooyong, you might recall, with the money of global warming crusaders. So she should have thought twice before asking Albanese this attempted gotcha today.
I understand that you attended a $5,000 a head post-budget dinner last night. Can you tell the House whether any fossil fuel industry lobbyists or other fossil fuel industry representatives were in attendance?
I've stood and had the great honour of being the Australian Labor Party candidate in 10 elections. During those 10 elections as a candidate for Greenlaw, I have spent less money on those 10 campaigns than the member for Kooyong did in her one.
Joining me on Culture Wars is Rowan Dean, editor of The Spectator Australia and host of Outsiders on Sky News on Sundays, every Sunday, 9 a.m. Rowan Dean, I love that. The lack of self-awareness from Ryan there is one thing, but the other is the double standards. You've got money coming from fossil fuel companies, oh, that's terrible, democracy in danger. Money coming from big green and renewable energy investors, carpetbaggers, that's democracy enhanced.
Yeah, 100%, Andrew. And it is kind of galling that these days the big end of town, those when we were all students at university or whatever, it was always all these big, bad, evil capitalists. Well, the big, bad capitalists who are having undue influence on all our politics these days are, of course, the renewables investors. That's where the big end of town is. That's where the big money is. That's where we see, for example, environmental wreckage occurring when windmills are being put out to sea or across farmland, where anything to do with renewables, because it is virtuous, because it is good, because it is compassionate, these people literally get away with whatever they want. And the Teals have to be really, really careful. They're bankrolled by big money from the big end of town. I wouldn't be looking too closely at where a lot of that money originally came from in terms of fossil fuels or not fossil fuels. But what should really disturb every Australian small business person, every Australian mum and dad, are we seriously demonising fossil fuels to the extent that we want to throw ourselves back into caves, into some kind of Stone Age existence? Because there is no way we or our society or our way of life can survive without fossil fuels. So if I have members of Parliament standing
Rowan,
up there,
green hydrogen just round the corner. Green hydrogen, mate.
That's right. Well, of course, the great fantasy product, which again is another massive boondoggle for the big end of town. Whether it will ever be achievable or whether it will ever actually deliver anything, I suspect not. But we've seen in the budget, Andrew. I'm glad that Anthony Albanese can point the finger at the hypocrisy of the Teals, and the hypocrisy of the Greens is legendary. But let's be honest. This budget is pouring billions of dollars into industries that don't actually exist. It's been called a magic pudding budget and those sorts of terms, but it is worse than that. It's a kind of Harry Potter fantasy, magician's witch's brew budget where we're going to conjure up these extraordinary industries and great wealth and prosperity for this nation out of pure fantasy. It's terrifying, and it should terrify every single person who's ever held a job, wants to hold a job, and by a job I don't mean a government job, one of the 36,000 jobs that they've magically conjured up again in this kind of Harry Potter budget, but real jobs where you create something, you sell it, it has its own value because you've crafted it well. Those sorts of jobs should be terrified that we have a government that is literally running on fantasy ideas and fantasy economics. And it's not going to end well, Andrew.
Look, that's exactly what's freaking me out as well, Rowan. I've got to be honest there. Look, meanwhile, having just said, well done, Albanese, for calling out Monique Ryan, he's got trouble landing on his lap again this afternoon. Labor's Afghan-born Senator Fatima Payman has defied Albanese and falsely accused Israel of genocide in Gaza, and then called out a known genocidal chant that Anthony Albanese says shouldn't be said, a chant for the destruction of Israel. She said, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. What does this tell you?
Well, it tells me what Judith Sloan has written in this next week's Spectator Australia, that multiculturalism is dead. Multiculturalism is the great failed policy that the left in particular, Labor in particular, have built the last few decades on, going back to Gough Whitlam, 5 decades, 6 decades. And it is a complete failure. And it has wreaked havoc on this country, where we are now seeing members of parliament, the children of immigrants who presumably we welcomed into this country with open arms, to become a part of the Australian way of life, to become integrated into the Australian way of life. And I'm sure this young lady has. But part of the deal of multiculturalism is that you leave behind the old hatreds. That was non-negotiable, or should have been non-negotiable, that if you come here to Australia, whatever it might be, it might be your hatreds from... I remember as a kid there was hatred between Yugoslavia and whatever, and there was these Serbs, and
I remember
whatever.
That.
Those sorts of things were quickly left behind and abandoned, and that's why those people from those parts of the world became such successful Australians. Similarly, there were long-standing issues in Greece, Turkey, etc., Cypriots. All these issues, Ireland, between the Catholics and the Protestants, these issues, the Australian compact was you leave it behind. It's over. You're an Aussie now, and that's that. And where we have a Labor MP not accepting that premise.
Absolutely. This is exactly the issue. You import people, you import the culture with them, and we were stupid. Well, those immigration ministers are stupid to believe that would not happen. Immigration has too often now become colonisation. That's how it's got to be recognised now. Rowan Dean, thank you so much indeed for your time.